Everything, everything gonna be all right this morning.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are in it once again. Another one for the archives, live and direct here from the gateway to the west. The day after Cinco in this year of our Lord 2024, and I'm absolutely elated to be linking up, reconnecting once again with this gentleman. To say I'm a huge fan, it'd be an understatement. I had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman many, many years ago. As anybody, listens to this show or knows me, I'm an old school, as they call it, old school, huge professional wrestling fan. Not so much of the sports entertainment, but professional wrestling. In my opinion, the golden age, I guess if you're 80, 70 years old, the golden age was maybe, 50s, Gorgeous George, etc. But for me, as a little bit younger guy, the late 70s, early mid-80s was just crushing it. For me, that was the golden age, man. NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, etc. This gentleman, he's really one of the last of the Mohicans, if you will, the old school promoters. He had shops set up here in the heart of the professional wrestling world because the National Wrestling Alliance was headquartered at one point in time right here in St. Louis, Missouri. He was rolling with the likes of Larry Madisick, the late, great Larry Madisick, Sam Muchnick, Wrestling at the Chase, etc. And he has been continuing that tradition of just incredible old school professional wrestling with his promotion, Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling. He's been on the show a couple other times. He's actually one of my first guests here on It's Me Speaking to You back in the day, and even had the absolute just incredible opportunity before he passed to talk to Herb as well as the great Larry Madisick. Coming up, Herb has assembled one of the biggest professional wrestling fan fest I personally have ever seen, coming up May 17th and most notably May 18th right here in St. Louis, Missouri at the Aviator Hotel. I am so very thankful for him taking time out of his very busy schedule. Professional wrestling legend and good friend Herb Simmons. Herb, how are you, sir?
Well, my gosh, Jeffrey, it's been a while, even though I keep up with you as much as possible. And one of the favorite pictures that comes up on my Facebook timeline every year is the one of you, Larry Madisick, and myself at one of our local shows. I just thought that was a historical picture that I'll have forever. It's in my collection, and I joke and kid everybody that when I leave this great earth, my wife will probably have one of the biggest bonfires anybody will ever see. and I got people saying, no, tell her to call me. But that picture is definitely in there with the collection of stuff that I've collected over 51 years now as I've been promoting. So, but it is great talking to you. It's always a pleasure. You're always a man that shows transparency, and the shows and the programs that you get on there are interesting, and I'm just so honored to have you get me invited back on.
Yo, for sure. I definitely wanted to do whatever I could to help you promote this incredible event coming up here in May. But yeah, that picture for me was definitely on the bucket list. Like I said, being the huge fan as I am, not only was I able to get that picture with you and Larry, I think that night I actually called some matches with you and Larry. It was just, believe me, I was marking out, as they say, my friend, marking out without a shadow of a doubt. But how have you been, man? Like you said, it's been a hot minute. How's life treating you?
Yeah, life is good. A lot of people say, they're thankful just to get up and be able to put their feet on the floor in the morning.
Amen.
I take it a little step further. I say I'm just thankful to be able to open my eyes in the morning and see the ceiling. And then I worry about putting my feet on the floor. But no, it's good. It's I take it one day at a time. I still work. I'm 71 years old, but I got a day job, and I'm still the mayor of my hometown of East Carondelet, Illinois now for 47 or 48 years, I think it's been. But I enjoy working, and I think as long as the good Lord allows me to do that, I'm going to continue to do it. My wife is the spark behind the knock. She's had some health issues, but again, we had we have huge monthly shows, and we're still helping organizations raise money. During the pandemic, all the organizations shut down for 2 years, and So we're still playing catch up to try to help our local police departments and church organizations and Shriners and people like that raise the funds that they missed out on. So, that's about 99% of what we do is fundraisers for organizations.
Well, and it is so very cool, Herb. That's another thing why, I got so much love for you. You're not only involved in the professional wrestling business, but like you said, you're very community-based and community involved. And the things you guys do to help with the community, I've always thought was really cool over there at the East Caron Delight Community Center. And just in general, you've always been so involved in the community. And that's always tip of the cap for me.
Well, and I think that's what we do. When you get into the public office, you take an oath to help others, and you may not always have the right answer for them, but you at least owe them the respect to try to help solve their crisis at that time, because what may not seem like something big to other people, to them it is. And whether it be a flooding issue or a street light issue being out or something like that, I answer all calls. I have people saying, well, that guy's not for you. And I say, I don't care if he is or he isn't. I took an oath to uphold, to do my best. And whether he comes to the voting poll on election day and votes for me or votes for whoever the other person is, that's his choice. But if I'm the one that's sitting in that chair, it's my duty to do what I can for him. And that's just who I've always been. And
Yes.
It's kind of like the wrestling business. Sam Muchnick always told me, he said, if you treat the boys right, they'll treat you right. And that's one of the reasons why I'm one of the promoters that can reach out and call these guys and say, hey, I've got this show going on. If you're available, can you be there? And it's hey, what time do you need me? And that's it's always been great. That's why I go to Cauliflower Alley Club every year, and I go up to Waterloo, Iowa to the Tragus Hall of Fame. And so it's in the business, as just what you've learned about it and what you've researched, it's back in the day, it was a very tight-knit organization, and it's loosened up over the years. But I'm one of the ones that try to keep the old school mentality and the history alive, and I think we've been doing a good job at that by keeping the legends that we haven't lost, keeping their name out there. And I tell people that I'm only building on the foundation that those gentlemen built. Yes.
Yeah.
Without them, there is no professional wrestling the way we grew up on,
Yeah, without a doubt. And again, it's just so much respect. And I'm glad you beat me to the punch here, because I did want to ask about it. And I swear, I'm going to join, and I really want to go out to Las Vegas and check this out because, like you said, the people who laid the foundation for what we're seeing now, it's absolutely, the lineage goes back so far. I mean, everyone has their own particular golden age, but for me, it was like the late 70s, mid to early 80s. Talk to me about the Cauliflower Alley Club and how important that is for wrestlers post the business, and how important that is for helping them with some of their financial issues if they have some.
Well, I tell the workers nowadays, my locker room and other promoters that I'm close with, to share the information. It's like a supplemental insurance policy as far as I'm concerned. And for a very small fee, they have an annual fee you can pay, or you can become a lifetime member. But it is an organization that is real close to my heart because I'm the ambassador for it. Our CEO, President Brian Blair, and the executive board asked me a couple of years ago to serve as the ambassador after my good friend Carl Lauer passed away. And so I do my best by trying to spread the word and making contacts with promoters across the country and help try to get some businesses involved to help offset it because, it's strictly funded by our membership.
Right.
And but, if you're a worker, it's been in the business for at least, I think it's 3 years now, and you fall on hard times. Let's say you have an injury or, you need help with rent or you've lost your job and you've had the history of being in the business, they're there to help you supplement those outstanding bills. And what I like about it is it's very close, tight-lipped. We don't loan Jeffrey Wilson money and then we go out there and advertise it unless you want to do that.
Right.
And we have had Brickhouse Brown, one of the members that they helped out, he gave the organization the authorization to, hey, tell them what you did for me. Tell them that you were able to help me get a couple more years of life living home and not having to be put on the street, you know. And I was there when he gave that from his heart. There wasn't a dry eye in that banquet room that night that he was there. And it was the following year that he had passed away. But it's people like that they have helped. And they you know, they have this annual reunion in Vegas every year. And you know, it's a networking where you go there and there's workers from all over the globe, and it's a big family. And you know, we have the Bachwinkle bologna blowout the one night where it's just everybody's standing around telling road trips. And
oh my gosh!
And it's great. And the thing about it is, you don't have to be a worker to join. You can be a fan and help support the organization. And that's kind of what I do, is to try to. A couple of years ago, I did a thing. One of our board members, Rich Inkling, and Darla Staggs, another young lady from the St. Louis area here, and Barbara Goodish, the widow of Bruiser Brody, and the daughter of J.J. Dillon, Pam Morrison. They were all in and at one of our shows, and we were spreading the word about the organization. And so I came up with the idea that, you know, I went out at halftime at the intermission and said, look, if you join the Cauliflower Alley Club here tonight and sign up, you get to come to the SICW shows throughout the rest of the year. And this was like 7-8 months still left of the year. And Rich Inkling, our vice chairman, was kind of taken back. He was shocked, you know, because just that night alone, I think he signed up like 27 people.
Nice.
And then he came to the TV taping the next day and signed up some more. And he got on the phone right away and called Brian Blair, our CEO, president, and told him that, hey, man, you won't believe what Herb just did. And, of course, that kind of just snowballed into a couple other promotions doing the same thing. And, you know, it was a win-win situation. Yeah, I had people that got to come for the next 7-8 months for free. But, you know, they came in, they bought concessions, they had a good time, and then plus the CAC benefited from it also. Yeah. So it was a win-win for everybody. But the main focus of that was to get more members into the CAC, and hopefully they and a couple of those were lifetime membership awards that joined
nice.
Them. And so yeah, it's great. You know, we get a good turnout every year in Las Vegas, and I mean it's always a who. I'm so happy this coming year, one of our local young men is going to receive the Wrestler of the Year award, and he has been around for many years, and that's the Night Train Gary Jackson.
Yes.
You probably know Gary.
Yeah.
You've seen him around. He's been with me forever and ever. In fact, we used to sneak him into the Chase Park Plaza at the Coruscant room when he wasn't old enough to wrestle at the studio setting. You had to be 16 years old to get in there, and he was only like 15.
Wow!
But his mom worked with Mickey Garagiola at Ruggieri's, and she always said, "Hey, my son wants to be in the wrestling business, and he really loves it." And so,
wow,
we'd always get him in. So he was probably one of the youngest guys that ever got to come to the TV tapings. But I'm so excited about that. He deserves it, and I was honored a few years ago. They gave me the lifetime Red Bastien Award and
nice. Friendship
Award. So it's like I said, it's a great organization, and I plead with anybody who ever has been a wrestling fan out there, please consider to become a member, because you'll be helping not only the past your legends that you grew up watching,
sure.
but the current workers and the future workers. It's a great organization.
Yeah, it is beyond a good organization, and the work that they do. It helps transform and change lives. And your position with the organization, really, Herb, is just a testament to your lifelong contribution to this wonderful thing we call professional wrestling. And you mentioned a couple people who I happen to know. I happen to have the absolute privilege and pleasure to interview the widow of Bruiser Brody, Barbara Goodish. Shout out to Barbara. Hope you are doing well. And actually, I've met her before, but I recently reached out to her because I'm starting to do some true crime podcasting with an organization, and Darla had mentioned something about a young lady who got in some criminal stuff herself, but she was a huge wrestling fan. So shout out to Darla, and thank you for tipping me off to that person. I've been doing some research, and we'll be doing an episode on that. So shout out to Barbara and Darla. Something you also mentioned, the center or the museum or whatever it exactly is in Waterloo, Iowa. Tip us up on that, because that's another one I really, really want to go to, and it's absolutely crucial and essential to educating people again on the lineage and the history of professional wrestling.
Yeah, and the good thing about that, if you're into the amateur wrestling, Iowa State, great amateur wrestling program, have been for years, and Dan Gable Museum is there. Of course, Dan Gable, great amateur wrestling, and Luthez. It's called the Tragus Thez Hall of Fame. And Luthez is a name that is synonymous with St. Louis. I mean,
yes.
If you was a wrestling fan, you had to know Luthez because he was family lived there. He lived there for growing up there. He was a promoter in the wrestling business. A lot of fans don't know it, but him and Sam Muchnick used to be rivals. I mean, they each had different promotions, and before they became one, and then of course, dating way back in the 50s and 60s, but up in Waterloo, Iowa is where it's at. In fact, the National Wrestling Alliance had an office up there, and the building is still there. But they got a nice little museum there that has both the amateur and the professional wrestling memorabilia in it. And so every year they have a big function up there. My good friend from Impact Wrestling, Troy Peterson, is kind of the spark behind the knock there, the coordinator, him. And then, of course, my good friend Jerry Briscoe is deeply involved in that organization. And Jerry and Troy just recently asked me to sit on the board there and kind of help this is their 25th year that we're celebrating coming up in July.
That's awesome.
And so, we got a big thing going on. In fact, this year I'm taking up Tito Santana Farm and Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. And it's always a great time up there. But if you're into the amateur and professional side, you can come in there and see it. Again, it's a 3-day deal. Have the big wrestling show at the night before the big benefits goes on. It's a nice meet and greet, and a lot of times J.J. Dillon's there, Baron von Raschke, some of the guys that are still with us, So it's Nard the Barbarian is there, and last year I took up Haku and Jimmy Valiant, the Boogie Woogie Man, and the year before I took up Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda. So I always try to help them out all I can. But
awesome, yeah.
They put on a class act, and speaking of Cowboy Bob Orton Jr., he's one of our St. Louis people here, and he's going to be inducted into the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame this year, right beside of his father, who was on the first wrestling card of Wrestling at the Chase in 1959.
Wow.
We inducted him back in 2015, and the good news is the entire Orton family will be at the induction for Bob Orton Jr. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah, and if people don't know, I mean, it's Bob Orton Sr., obviously Randy Orton, Barry O. People may not recognize him as part of the Orton family, and then obviously Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. I mean, a very, very deep, multiple generation family in wrestling. And, you talking Waterloo, Iowa, like you said, Iowa amateur wrestling has such a deep, rich history. This is bucket list for me, Herb. I don't know if you know, but I actually had a chance to interview Dan Gable a few years ago, and it just blew me away. So if you go to that podcast network, mostly check it out on SoundCloud, because I got them divided up into playlists on SoundCloud. So if you go to Everything Combat, the show I used to host with UFC Hall of Famer Pat Miletich, you will find my conversation with Dan Gable, and just mind-blowing, just listening to him and how he got to be as great as he was. Just a very, very fascinating individual, an interesting story. And Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant, he's going to be at the Fanfest, if I remember correctly. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. Jimmy's a great friend, and I've had him in several times over the years. And like I said, I took him up to Waterloo, Iowa last year. Him and Haku or Ming, whichever one you want to refer to him as, toughest guy in the professional wrestling
That's
business.
what they say.
And,
That's what they say.
well, believe me, it's true. And he and it was a great time. The fans just loved the Boogie Woogie Man, and he'll be joining us. He's one of the 60 plus legends and special guests coming to St. Louis.
60 plus. I mean, like I said, over the weeks and last couple months, I've obviously follow you, and you're just like, this person's coming to the FanFest. This person's coming to the FanFest. I'm like, whoa, you were really. I mean, you always outdo yourself. But just, ladies and gentlemen, this FanFest, if you happen to be in Missouri, and if you're not and want to come, and you're old school wrestling fan, May 17th and 18th, you will get all you could possibly handle. I mean, I see you got Tommy Wildfire Rich. That's what I came up on, man. Tommy Wildfire Rich and Georgia Championship Wrestling. That was what it was all about for me. Him and Buzz Sawyer, etc. I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm also, shout out to my good friend, man, the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez. You brought him in a few years ago. Had a great chance. I actually drank a beer with Manny. I told Manny, if I had $1 for the amount of pillows I used to beat up and give the flying burrito to, I'd be a very, very wealthy man. Love me some Manny. Looking forward to seeing everybody. But yeah, so you got May 18th, May 17th, Friday and Saturday, FanFest 2, St. Louis, Missouri. How did it all come together, Herb? And what's that weekend going to look like? I know Friday you got the Bill Apter one-man show, and like you said, you got the kind of Hall of Fame going on, and you got some matches going on. What can we all expect for that weekend, my friend?
Well, I think we have to start back about a year ago in May. You know, I've always done the Bruiser Brody Memorial, and that's kind of been my pledge to Barbara Goodish, the widow of Bruiser Brody, that as long as I had breath in me, that I would always pay tribute and honor to the late, great Bruiser Brody, because not only was he an associate in the business, but we were on the verge of another business venture, him and I and Larry Matasek, more so Brody and I. So I want to keep his name and his legacy alive, and Barbara has gave that blessing. That's why she clears her schedule every year to come in and join us in May, and we celebrate the anniversary of Wrestling at the Chase. It had just been on a year on television, because it started on television in 1959 in May. So we kind of put that all together, and we've been doing that. So last year we came up with a harebrained idea that they've had these fan fests all over the country, and but they've never done one. We actually did a semi-one, Larry and I did, in 2012. We helped a gentleman named Colonel Buck Robley. There was a money guy that was a big Road Warrior fan, and he wanted to bring one, so we did it at St. Charles, and we had about 23 of the legends in then, but there was no wrestling associated with it or anything of that sort. And it was really a flop. They started off with ticket prices way above what the demographics could afford here in our area. And a week before that show, you know, you could almost buy them for nothing, and which is always a bad sign when you've got to start cutting the prices of tickets. But anyway, last May we said, you know, before that, you know, several months, we said, let's put a fan fest together. And so we put one in last May, and we had 52 or 53. I think I had 53 booked, and 52 were able to show up. And it went off great. I mean, fans came from all over, not just St. Louis, the Midwest. I mean, we had them from Canada, we had them from California, from Tennessee. And so everything went great. I had some vendors that helped to bring a few of the boys in, and we had vendors set up in the hallway that were selling their action figures, their T-shirts. We had some podcast organizations there doing live podcasts. And so, I mean, it was just a great, and it was only the one day. And I had originally booked Bill Apter back then. And of course, the next day he calls me and said, Herb, I got a problem. He said, it's Mother's Day weekend. And I said, I understand. And I said, but it's the only date I could get at the hotel, because I wanted to keep everything right at the same place, you know, instead of having to put another building somewhere and then you have to transport your guest and that. So I was lucky to get the Aviator, and So I told Bill, I said, okay, I hate that. He says, and plus, Herb, he says, it's my anniversary. And I said, oh, let's say no more. Family first, and happy wife, happy life.
There you go.
And so, but this year when I announced the date, which was not Mother's Day weekend and not his anniversary, he called up and said, hey, well, I'm in. Why don't I come in and do my one-man show on Friday night? Which, if nobody's seen his one-man show, it is great. It's not your typical question and answer thing. I mean, he does his impersonations of Dusty Rhodes and Hulk Hogan, and we'll be playing some videos and some trivia questions, and it's going to be fun. Teddy Long is going to be there and kind of take part in it. Medusa is going to be there taking part in it. And I'm sure because all the other guys start coming in about 6 o'clock Friday morning from the airport, we'll be getting them there. And so I'm sure a lot of them will be poking their head in the door. And the only thing we do on Friday night, we don't allow any photos to be taken because we want people to be at the Fanfest. Because there are fans that will camp out at the hotel or they camp out at the airport wanting to get, and then they don't want to come and support the Fan Fest. And of course, we need them to support it because if this is something, even if I don't do it next year, hopefully somebody will pick it up and keep the tradition going like they do across the country. So anyway, with this year, and Sam Muchnick always told Larry and I, if you're going to do something a second time, you either got to do it as good or better.
Right.
And it's just kind of like putting a show on. If you see the same wrestling show, the same talent over and over, it gets stagnant.
Yeah.
Well, this year we're over 60 plus less legends and special guests. And you're right. The way I was advertising it, I'd wait a day and I'd post a picture, and then I'd wait another 2 or 3 days and post another picture. And it was to the point where people were texting me and saying, "Man, how many more you got?" And
exactly.
So, well, and the good thing, Jeff, is a lot of these guys were calling me and saying, "Hey, we want to be a part of it." St. Louis.
Sure.
The old saying, and if you looked at some of the wrestlers that have written books, or if you heard them on these podcasts, they'll tell you, if you made it to St. Louis, you knew you made it big in wrestling, and that's what the everybody talked about. Ric Flair and you name it. They loved Sam Muchnick. They loved the way he did business. He treated them fair, and like I said, that's kind of why Larry had the reputation he did. And I hope that I can never fill the shoes of those guys, and I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to practice and preach what they taught me. And for 51 years, it's worked. Yeah. And so I think that's why when you get Abdullah the Butcher's, I'll be there, Herb, or yes. Tommy Rich,
Somebody say like something about wildfire.
Somebody going to get fired up. Yes, sir. And, but, then you got Jimmy Hart, the Mouth of the South. He's going to be kind of hosting the events on Saturday for me. And you give Jimmy a microphone or his megaphone, and he'll entertain you forever. And so, Sergeant Slaughter, people like that, Haku's back there, jumping Jim Brunzell, Greg Gagne, Little Cato. His dad, Lord Littlebrook, worked for me for many years, along with Cowboy Lang and Little Tokyo. So Cato don't do a lot of Fan Fest. This is probably going to be one of the first ones he's done ever here. And,
wow!
So I'm looking forward to that. And then like I said, we got Debbie Combs, Wendy Richter's being inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Just looking at my thumbnail here that I'm going to use for the description, you got Typhoon coming in, you got Jim Brunzell, Brian Beck, Steve Curran, formerly the Fabulous Ones. You got looks like Greg Gagne, Rip Rogers. You got my boy Manny Fernandez, Bill Apter, Dr. D, David Schultz, Jimmy Valiant. Like you said, you got Medusa, Leilani Kai, The Night Train, Teddy Long, Bob Orton, Barbara Goodish. Got Jimmy Hart, like you said. You got Dennis Condrey from the Midnight Express, Coco Beware. Tom Pritchard, Tony Gurria, old school Tony Gurria, Tommy Wildfire Rich. Man, you got them all here. The Godfather, Dan Severin, King Haku, Jerry Briscoe, Robert Gibson. It looks like that Mike Powers right there. It looks like Mike Powers, Abdullah the Butcher, JBL, Sergeant Slaughter, Tito Santana, One Man Gang. man, you got them all, Herb.
Yeah, and there's a few names that aren't. Jerry Briscoe. That poster has been updated like probably 7 or 8 times, and Jerry Briscoe's on there, and and we just added former WWE referee. I just signed him up the other night. So James Beard, third man in the ring.
Yeah,
he was
go.
big with the Von Erich organization. He's coming back, and and then we've got other people being inducted in the Hall of Fame. Leilani Kai is being inducted along with Wendy Richter and Judy Martin. I've got one of my good friends in the business, Malaya Hosaka, a female worker that I'm trying to find somebody to work her that's got a Missouri license because she's one heck of a piece of talent. But so far, I'm running out of anybody who was willing to get in there. But I've told her either you're gonna work and help me with the induction, or you're going to just do the induction of the ladies. And the reason why she put such an organizational part of the CAC Club a few years ago, she brought in, all the lady wrestlers that are still with us, and it was kind of like the CC of the lady wrestlers that year. And
wow.
And she did a fabulous job of getting them all the awards that they deserved. And so Malaya is just a great lady, and she's going to be there to help induct these 3 ladies. And then we'll be giving out a Lifetime Achievement Award this year that will be named that night. And and then, of course, it's all rounded off by the Bruiser Brody Memorial, the Battle Royal.
Yes.
We'll have several matches with that, and then Barbara Goodish gives the big trophy cup to the winner of the Battle Royal. And then I got to get everybody Sunday morning back to the airports to get them back home.
Yeah.
So I think right now we're at 50. Dr. D. David Schultz, he drives in. Coco Beware drives in. But the rest of them are getting on the big birds flying in. And, it'd be nice if they were all coming from the same location. Yeah. But last year I think we made 50 trips from the airport to the hotel, and then at Sunday back to the airport. So it's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of moving parts for sure.
But again, it was well worth it as far as just meeting new fans and people telling their stories about how they went to the wrestling at the Kiel Auditorium, how they enjoyed watching Johnny Valentine and Gene Kaniski and Pat O'Connor, names that we all grew up on, and the Von Erichs, and and then when I tell them the story about, Kevin Von Erich being from Barndover in Belleville, Illinois. Oh, no, he's from Texas. No. Do your research and you'll find out.
I did not know Kevin was born in Belleville, really?
Yeah, in fact, he works. The hospital's not there; it got torn down a couple of years ago. But it's actually the hospital location was St. Elizabeth's Hospital, and it was a block away from where my day job is. And
wow,
yeah, that's where Kevin was born at. And it's a trivia question we use at all of our trivia games. So.
I never, as deep as I am in the game, I never would have got that one. But nothing surprises me anymore. But again, Herb, this is a huge testament to your mark in the professional wrestling business, to be able to assemble this kind of just legendary status type of folks. I mean, nobody's going anywhere. No, again, everyone, I'm not wishing anything, but we are losing a lot of our old school legends. So fans, get out here, man. Who knows? I mean, you're never going to be able to see, I'm going to say never, but you're going to be hard pressed to find something like this huge assembly of such legendary old school status anytime soon, man. And it's absolutely next level. And since you brought up Kevin Von Erich, I've been actually curious about this because the Iron Claw movie came out not too long ago. And again, it's a movie. People like you and me, I'm sitting here watching. I'm like, this is who you chose as Bill Mercer? What? Like it was just, to me, some of it didn't make sense, and they left out a lot of stuff. But what was your thoughts on that movie? Understanding that it is a movie and they can't cover everything, how do you think they did as far as casting and just the story of everything? What do you think?
Well, here's the thing, Jeff. I'll be honest with you and your listeners. I have not watched it. And,
okay.
Let me tell you why. I know a lot of fans that they were standing in line to watch it because that's how much enthusiasm that Von Erich brought to the business.
Yes.
So after I heard from some of my locker room people who went and saw it and stood in line, and then just some other friends and some of the things that they were telling me, because I'm a critic. If I go to a movie,
Oh, yeah.
I'm a critic. So knowing that, and from what they told me, like the guy who was portraying Harley Race, who's throwing right hand punches. Well, Harley never threw a right hand punch in his life.
Well, even the way they had him wearing his belt, it was all super high, kind of how they used to wear it back in the day. I just like, that's not, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and I'd be the guy in the local theater who'd stand up and say, "Whoa, wait a minute!
Yeah.
Harley don't punch with his right hand." But and then they didn't talk about the other Von Erich boy until they just barely mentioned him at the end. And
which one? Chris, the youngest?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, there were parts, and again, as you said, it was a movie. It wasn't a documentary.
I honestly, I didn't care for the whole, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm just thinking out loud. I didn't care for the whole, like, the night he won the belt at the Parade of Champions, that's when he jumped on the motorcycle and did the thing. It was like 10 years later. It was, I mean, you haven't seen the movie.
But I've heard all that. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what's really, I mean, I'm going to watch it. There's no doubt about it.
You should
see it. I will, but I wanted to get all of that out of the way, and then because then when I go there, I won't be so voiceful about it. Yeah. I don't want to be the one to get thrown out of the movie theater because I said, no, this is bullshit. Oh, excuse me, but
no, you're good. You're good.
But again, I want because knowing the family the way I did. I mean, there was times that when I would go to the office with Larry, Fritz would be sitting in there with Sam.
Wow.
And I was a kid at a candy shop.
Right.
And then they said they tried to portray in the movie that Sam didn't like Fritz, and they had a business relationship, and it was at times, just like with other promoters, it was a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
But that's what made Sam Muchnick so great. He was the peacekeeper. That's what Larry and I always referred to him as when these promoters were arguing over that NWA title and who was going to be the champion and all that. Sam would be the one who was getting those calls, and then when something was going wrong on a show down at Paul Bosch's, in Houston or somewhere like that, or up at Stu Hart's in Calgary, Sam was getting those calls, and he'd say, "This is what we're going to do. Remember, guys, this is like the pie that we made.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna cut it up, and each of us is going to get a sliver of it, and then wherever that final piece ends, whatever is left, we're going to continue to slice that up for all of us. It isn't we all get a small piece and then somebody gets a big piece.
Right.
He was fair. He was equal. It was like he did with the boys. If your payoff for your show at the Kiel Auditorium was $2,183.23.
Yeah.
Your 23 cents was in that envelope also.
Yeah.
And that's what Sam, that was one of his main characteristics, being fair and being honest. But above and beyond that, he was a businessman. I have people even at this stage say, well, what do you know about wrestling? You didn't ever take no bumps. And I said, well, let me stop and think. I don't think Sam Muchnick did.
Yeah.
I don't think Larry Matisek took any bumps. But I know that they were good promoters. They were fair promoters. And so if I can continue to do what they did, I don't need to go out there and take the bumps. That's what I pay the professionals to do. I'm not the professional wrestler.
Well, and that was one of the things you always heard about your even your Paul Bosch's. I mean, it was big. I mean, obviously the professional wrestling business can be somewhat cutthroat, a lot of travel, a lot of time away from home. So financially, it really has to be worth it. So your Sam Muchnick, I remember hearing about like Paul Bosch was a good payoff guy, and so it's been interesting, Herb, over the years. Obviously, I'm not 10 years old anymore, so it's like I've come out of the whole character side of it and watching shoot interviews and actually talking to people like Manny and yourself. And I mean, people still kind of respect the business and protect it, but understanding the business side of it has given it a whole different level and dimension of respect for it, really, because it was obviously more than just the work side of it. You had almost the shoot backstage side of it, real life stuff, being away from home, payoffs, all the road stuff. I mean, it's a very, very fascinating industry and business to learn about, quite frankly.
Well, it is, and as you said, the toothpaste has been out of the tube for a long time now,
Yeah.
and but that doesn't mean I have to keep squeezing it. And
I like that. I like that, Herb.
and that's what I tell people. I get that question asked to me all the time, and I kind of refer to it like, hey, you go to the movies, you're entertained by that.
Yes.
If you want to believe everything you see at the movie, that's up to you. I'm not going to try to, I always tell them John Wayne has always been my hero. When I barbecue, I got a John Wayne apron that I wear. When I fry fish, I wear a John Wayne, and it gets talked. And it gets talked about more than anybody. And I tell even the news media when I'm doing an interview over the wrestling, they'll come up and say, "Oh, it's fake. It's this." And I said, "Wait a minute. See this guy right here? This John Wayne. He's my hero. If I want to believe he shot the bad guys and he shot the Indians or whatever it was, that's my thought. That's my belief. That's my entertainment."
Yeah.
Now, ask a guy like David Schultz. If you want to get an answer about it.
Yeah. Not advisable. Not advisable.
No, not advisable.
Ask John Stossel.
John Strassel. Yeah, now he made John Strassel famous. But again, in poor David, when I took him out to Las Vegas a couple of years ago when he got the award out there the night before, we were sitting in the what they call the nostalgia room, and he leaned over to me. He says, "Guess what, Herb?" I said, "What's that, Dave?" He said, "They just made the biggest mistake ever." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Tomorrow night, they're giving me a microphone." and it was a great show. And so I'm glad Dave's going to join us on Dr. D's joining us on the 18th. And it'll be fun if anybody's a Dr. D David Schultz fan. And if you want to know about the John Stossel episode, he'll be more than glad to tell you about it. And, but you're right. The business, I remember my first true sit down encounter with Sam Muchnick, and I was, man, you talk about knees knocking. I mean, we were sitting out at the racetrack restaurant. He liked to go out and play some of the horse races, but he loved the steaks that they had at the restaurant. And Larry and I was there. Larry took me. I didn't even know we were going to meet Sam. I knew we were going to dinner, but I didn't know Sam was going to be there until I could pull up on the lot. And I, well, this way.
What year is this, Herb? If you don't mind me asking, what year is this?
This would have been back in 1971.
Wow.
And so we go in and so I see Sam sitting there, and very noticeable individual, because Sam, one of two things. He always had a suit on, or a suit coat and a tie, or he'd have a shirt and a tie on. And of course, if you know Herb Simmons much, you don't see me too often without a tie on.
There you go.
As Sam always said, you gotta be the part.
Yep.
If you want to play it, you got to be it.
That's
right. So man, we're sitting there, and we order these steaks and potatoes and a salad and all that. And like I said, my knees are knocking. I mean, I feel like I'm sitting there with a larger than life person, because I grew up watching. People don't even realize that before wrestling at the Chase was on Channel 11, it had been on Channel 5 for a short time. And everybody says, "Oh, I used to watch it on Saturday night and then again on Sunday morning." Well, guess what? I watched it when it was on Wednesday nights. And people say, "No, it was never on." Yes, it was. And even Ed Wheatley, I know that's the name you probably heard, because he's the one that did the book a couple of years ago, Wrestling at the Chase, the second book that I helped work on.
Yes.
I did the first one with Larry. Well, Ed Wheatley, great friend, great author, he did this coffee table book. And that was one of the arguing points that him and I had. And he researched. He said, "Herb, I can't find anywhere it was on Wednesday night." I said, "Let me tell you, I've got the tape." And now it's from 1962, the tape that Luthez, Joe Garagiola gave Larry and I. And it's the old drum roll, and it's the Busch Bavarian Anheuser-Busch, because they sponsored it. The same business that does my printing for me today, Anheuser-Busch. And
Wow.
It says, "Welcome to Wrestling at the Chase with your host, Joe Garagiola, comes to you each and every Wednesday night." And it's got that across the screen on the tape. And so I sent it to him, and he said, "My gosh," he said, "I've been looking and looking and looking, but there's not that many people out here to remember us back on a Wednesday night." And
how dare he
so,
question Herb Simmons? How dare he?
Well, he don't anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But again, he great book, and then he did the documentary, The Head Over Heels, that I helped him with, and it got nominated for an Emmy. And it's if you haven't seen that yet, it's on PBS Channel 9. They have it on all the time, and you can get it online. But tells the story of wrestling, the chase of St. Louis with Sam and everything, you know. Talks about us at SICW and about the Bob Orton training academy he runs for me. And so it's a great documentary. But back to the Sam sitting there at the steak eating it. And I'd always heard these horror stories about the business. And remember, I'm just an independent guy running independent shows.
If you don't mind, what were the horror stories you had heard? I mean, obviously we hear a bunch of them, you know, different iterations of it. What did you hear coming into your meeting with Sam?
Oh, cutthroat, and you don't go into other people's territories. I mean, one of the biggest arguments I ever had with anybody was Dick the Bruiser when I started invading his Southern Illinois territory, because he was running out of Indiana and Indianapolis, and he would run over across the border into Illinois, down in Southern Illinois, and up in Waseca up north, Illinois, Springfield, Illinois. When I first went into Springfield, Illinois, I bought TV advertisement. And I didn't know anything about this, but they put my commercials in the body of his wrestling show.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. And it was the shit hit the fan. And of course, then when his daughter's husband, who was Spike Huber, when they split up, he tried blackballing Spike, and Larry and I was the only promotion that would have Spike work. And Spike was a regular guy with us for a couple of years. And to this day, in fact, Spike showed up at the Fanfest last May, and he's back with Bruiser's daughter now, and they're living in Memphis, and he brought Michelle along, and so it was kind of like old home week. So, but yeah, that was one of the biggest. I mean, he threatened me, and he was going to run me out of business, and all kinds of stuff.
Well, that's something that can't be understated. And as like I said, as I get older and understand the business more, I mean, you cannot understate the territory days and the definitive boundaries for the territories. I remember watching the Heroes of World Class, a Brian Harrison World Class documentary. They're talking to Mickey Grant. Mickey Grant was, I mean, it's a pejorative term, but it's almost like the mafia. You don't come into our town without permission. And that's how it was. Exactly right. Back in the day, I think it was WWF came into Kansas City, which was Harley's territory. And Harley came in with a gun looking for Hulk Hogan. Like, this is real stuff.
Well, yeah.
Set the ring on fire, supposedly.
Heard all those stories, and that's why, you know, I'm sitting there with Sam and Larry, and you know, and I'm thinking, oh boy, and Sam's cutting his steak up, right? And he says, Larry tells me you want to learn about the business. And I said, yeah. I said, you know, I want to learn more about behind the scenes. I want to learn about the booking, the promotional part of it, you know, the integral parts of it. And, you know, he's telling me about, you know, you got to respect the business. And if you do, it'll respect you. And he had that steak knife in his hand. And I'm thinking, holy shit, you know, what's going to happen here, you know? And he took and he pointed it up to his earlobe. And he says, I'm going to tell you something, Herb. You keep these open. And he took and pointed it to his lips. And he said, you keep this shut. And he said, you'll go a long way in this business. And that's why, I mean, but I'm also smart enough to know that I tell people don't take kindness as weakness.
Right.
And that was what Sam did. Don't think because I'm this guy that will be the peacekeeper and I will be the mediator. If you crap in the house, I'm going to help. I'm going to get it cleaned up. And that's what he would do. He would be when two promoters in these other territories would start getting a little antsy and maybe trying to take over, it'd be Sam to say, now, wait a minute. We're either going to do this the easy way or the hard way. You know, at one time there was 32 different promotions throughout the country, and they all had their own little nick, you know, and that's what everybody was the misconception of Sam. Sam had one little territory, and it was called St. Louis, you know, And he would let guys like Geigel and them run out into St. Joe's, out of the Kansas City part, or they'd go up into Iowa and stuff like that. But they wouldn't go up into the Chicago area where Bob Lusch and them guys were running, and Dick the Bruiser. And then here, little Big Herb Simmons, as far as weight goes, come in, and I start running these shows. And then Tony Costa and I started running over at South Broadway Athletic Club. We ran everything from the Boot Hills of Missouri all the way up to the Indiana border, and that's where I got into it with Bruiser at. I'll never forget the meeting. He called, he said, I want to see you. And so I went all the way up to Indianapolis to the Armory. And at that time, my booker and I went up there, and he was a state trooper, crime scene technician for the state of Illinois. And he was actually one of the original assassins from down in Nashville, Wrestler, under the hood. And so I felt pretty confident going up there, until I got there. And then we get met by two big Samoans standing at the front door of the school at the Armory. I said, we're here to see Dick. Who? I said, I'm here to see Mr. Aflis. Who? I said, the Bruiser. And so I guess they were insulted I was calling him by his real name,
They hadn't gotten smartened up yet, maybe.
So then we get downstairs, and for an hour, they let us stand at the door like kids at the candy shop. And I told my booker, I said, he got the wrong guy here. So I said, come on, let's go. We're going to drive all the way back home. And by the time we got back upstairs to the front door, those two big Samoans were standing there again. And I'm thinking, oh, man, what's going to happen now?
Oh, geez.
And the boss wants to see you downstairs. I said, I just came from down there. He said, well, he wants to talk to you. So we go back down. And, of course, as we're approaching the locker room door, you could hear he's in there ratting and raving, and you hear shit being kicked around. And so they open the door, and we walk in, and Spike was standing in the back of the locker room, and he looks at me and he says, "So I understand you want to be in partners." I said, "I don't know who told you that." Well, I just heard that you're running in my territory, so I'm assuming that you want to be partners. And he says, we can work together. And he says, it'll work out good. He says, I've got it all figured out. We'll do a 90-10 split. And he says, we'll control all of this area. And I said, Dick, I don't need 90%. And I'll never forget. He got this awful look on his face. He said, what do you mean? No. He says, I'll take the 90. And he says, you do the promotional work, and I'll send you some of my boys. I said, look, I know that's not going to work the way. At that time, I was using guys like Brody and Murdoch, Blackwell, Greg Valentine,
Abdullah.
And, I said, I don't. And he was going to take 90% and give me 10%. And I was going to do all the work. And, I said, no, that's not going to work. And so we kind of parted ways then, and it wasn't much longer after that when Spike left Michelle, and then he tried blackballing him, and Spike called up and said, hey, are you on the list of me not being able to work for her? And I said, well, Spike, you know me. I take orders from one person, and that's my wife. So that's how Spike ended up kind of being for us for, like I said, a couple of years, and we worked him pretty good. And at that time, Spike had been on a lot of the TVs, and I had a lot of tapes and everything. And I think the ironic part is here recently, before Dick's wife, Louise, passed away, I was able to take the Bruiser's library off of her hands. Nice. And they're still on the 1-inch TV reels that I'm slowly but surely getting downloaded.
Oh my
gosh! I can start using them. Yeah.
So I meant to ask you. So do you still own? I mean, I don't mean to get into up in your business, but I mean, you still own the Chase library and a lot of these other video library, or not a lot, but the Chase and.
No, I got the Chase, and then and the thing is about these, Jeffrey, is Larry and I put 12 volumes of them out. It's been 20 years ago now. The first ones we put out was on VHS, the first 3 volumes of Wrestling at the Chase. And I'll never forget that. We had a gentleman named Scott Cooper, who used to be the production guy over at South Broadway Athletic Club with us. And he was the one who was putting the show together for us. And so he put three volumes, 1, 2, and 3 on VHS. And well, then he ends up getting a divorce and leaves the area. And so Larry and I are scurrying around trying to find somebody else. And so Larry's daughter's volleyball coach has a production company, and Larry takes me over there, and I'll never forget the night we walk into his office, and we're sitting there talking, and he says, "Now, how old are these tapes you guys are talking about?" And Larry said, "Well, the oldest one we got is 1962, and it's black and white, of course." And so we hand it to Charlie. Charlie Regal's his name, and he opens it up, and he had a machine. He put it in there, and of course, it's a great copy. You know, it's because it's been preserved. It hasn't been played over and over and over.
Yes.
And he says, I got a question for you guys. He says, you know, why did you put these on VHS? And Larry and I looked at one another like, well, what the hell is he talking about? And Larry told him, he says, well, what do you mean? What should we have done with them? He says, well, he said, you know, you'd have been better off to put them on DVDs. And Larry and I looked at one another and said, what the heck's a DVD? and Charlie reached in his drawer and pulled out this real shiny thing, you know, it looked like a Frisbee. And he said, this is what you want to put them on, you know. So we had him remaster volumes 1, 2, and 3 and put them on DVDs, and then we did the remaining ones on DVDs, and we sent them all over the country. And I mean, even to Japan, we sent orders there. And we were working on volume. I still have volume 13, but I just haven't got it produced yet because we did that just before Larry passed away. And I'm one day when I can. You know, there's not a day goes by that I don't think about Larry, especially now going on with this fan test. I wish I had him here because first of all, after I got through listening to him telling me, what in the hell are you thinking? What are you doing? Why are you bringing in 60 people? And then he'd calm down and then he'd say, okay, well, then this is what we got to do. So I wish I had him here just to bounce things off of, you know. But
that's so awesome.
And Brody, if Brody was still with us, he would be here. I've got on my wall in my living room, I have 3 stand-up cardboard cutouts that you can buy, you know, and I had one made of Sam Muchnick, one of Larry Matysek, and one of Bruiser Brody. Because
well, you just lost one of your pups who was named Brody, what, didn't you?
Yep, and I still got Bruiser, but I lost Brody, and Bruiser's about 160-pound German Shepherd that is a big lap dog, but he doesn't have the temperament of Bruiser Brody, but I love him to death. But no, so when I walk in the house, it's the first thing I see is those 3 men because I owe everything to them as far as the wrestling business, and I'll never forget them.
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool, man. I mean, it's obviously as we get older, we obviously lose our friends, but it's just, you know, it's good to have those people that you just never, ever will forget. And those allegiances, those alliances are just something that just sticks with you. You know, like you said, they taught you so much throughout your life, and they're a huge part of your life. And I think it's really cool and, again, commendable how much love you have for Larry. And I know you do, man. I know you. I think about him all the time, and especially Bruiser, too. It sucks, man, to have lost them, but, you know, that's kind of a part of life, and we do our best to kind of get on with things. Speaking about your tape library, like I was saying, Brian Harrison, who did the Heroes of World Class movie right before Vince bought the WCCW library. So it was really cool, the timing for him to do that, because I suggest it's online somewhere, Heroes of World Class. Go check it out. It's really, really, it's a really good documentary. Has Vince ever approached you? I mean, because you're one of the last folks that had a major, you're the last archives that, you know, the AWA's gone, bought by Vince, NWA, Jim Crockett, all of that's been gobbled up by Vince. Has he ever approached you for your library?
Yes. He didn't approach me directly. He approached Larry because that's who I got the tapes from after Larry. I got the paper from the lawyers and everything, but him and I was kind of in it together when we were putting them together and selling them. He's the one that actually had the library. But J.R. Ross and Ted DiBiase was actually sent into St. Louis and met with Larry and I about purchasing the library. And of course they said, don't shoot the messenger, you know.
Yeah.
they threw a figure out on the table, and we just continue eating our salad. It was because that was back right. They had just recently, before that, purchased the Von Erich's library from Kevin.
Yeah.
And Kevin had told Larry the offer that he was getting, and what we were getting was pennies on the dollar. And so we held out, and I told Larry, I said, Vince can come and try all he wants, but and it's like the NWA now, Billy Corrigan, he was interested in him, and we negotiated for a while, and he didn't want to buy him. He wanted to license them, which I would have done that. But I wish Billy all the luck in the world. I think he listens to the wrong people sometimes. How do you say you're going to be old school and bring the NWA back, and then you get started, and it's like, 3 years you're running, and you don't even come to St. Louis? And then you bring in Ric Flair, and the only thing Ric Flair says about Sam Muchnick during his speech is, "Oh, he's a good payoff man." He talked more about Vince McMahon than he did Sam Muchnick, and you're in St. Louis. And then the next time you bring in two of my dear friends, Barry Windham and J.J. Dillon, but you let them get in the ring for less than 5 minutes. And I tried telling, you should have brought in the Dory Funks, the Baron von Raschke's, people like that was still with us, Ken Patera.
Yeah.
That people could say these were the people who wrestled here in St. Louis, and they're the ones that, and Rick did. There's no doubt about it, but Rick and Rick should have just been primed a little bit more to what he should have said that night. But I was fortunate here last year to do a show at the Coruscant Room, which was on the top of Larry and mine's bucket list. We always wanted to go back there or go there and do a show because we never did one under SICW. And the ironic part is the gentleman who actually used to own the Chase Park Plaza, the Harold Koppler and the Koppler family, and they own KPLR TV Channel 11. The grandson is a member of an organization that helps students out and get their careers ready and what life is going to be about. It actually reached out to Mr. Wheatley and I and said, "Hey, would SICW be interested in doing a wrestling event, just a 4 or 5 match show on a Sunday afternoon at the Coruscant Room?" And I said, "Man, can I take about 1 second to think about that?"
Yeah, exactly.
And I got to tell you, Jeff, just to walk in that room, I actually went about 2 hours earlier that day. I wanted to go in there myself, and just to stand in the middle of that room underneath the same chandeliers that people like Gorgeous George, Rip Hawk, Farmer Marlin, people like that were in there. It was just unbelievable. And the ironic part of that day, when the ring crew got there to set up the ring, the crossbars that makes the frame up are steel. And if you've ever taken 2 steel pipes and hit them together, you get that reverberating sound.
Yeah.
Well, they dropped one, and it landed on one that was laying on the floor. And the inside that Coruscant Room is kind of like a dome-shaped ceiling in it. And that reverberation just kind of sent shockwaves through you. It was kind of, and I told the guys we were in there, it was kind of like voices.
Yes,
and I could just say, man, wow. I wonder if that's Dick the Bruiser trying to tell us something, or Johnny Valentine. It was the coolest thing ever, and just to be in there, and we've got that on tape, and we'll keep that forever. And the young guys that work for SICW, they were so honored to be. I mean, there's guys out there that will never ever get that opportunity to do that. And that's what we've done with SICW. I've given the opportunity to guys. We did a show at the St. Louis History Museum. It's never been done there before.
Yes.
The only show produced at the Fox Theater we did, with Bruiser Brody, Kamal the Ugandan Giant, the Fantastics, the Midgets were on that card.
Jeez.
So Yeah, so we've been a lot of places. I mean, June 1st, we tied up with NASCAR. We'll be doing the big show with them out at the big track over here in Illinois. And I got Bob Orton going to be there for that. We're opening up for, and I kind of felt bad because I'm not a big remembering people's name, but evidently there's this rapper called Ludacris. So we'll be opening up for him that Saturday afternoon.
Wow.
And then Adam Wainwright's band is going to be there that morning, and he'll be on first, and then we're going to do like 3 matches in the morning and 3 matches in the afternoon. And so I'm really looking forward to being associated with the NASCAR people, you know.
Well, it sounds like there's not enough hours in the day, Herb, to get everything you need to get done. It's awesome to see you still getting after it, brother.
Well, we got I mean, we're booked pretty solid for the rest of the year. You know, we'll be in Fairmont City for the police and fire department. We go to Sandoval, Illinois for the school function there. Breeze, Illinois later on this year. Down in Monroe County, Illinois for a fundraiser for a 2 sisters that got an organization to help school kids. And so, I mean, it's those are the type of people we want to help. You know, we want to go out there and get the word out there. And, you know, we've always said, you know, we're not the organization that goes and rents the local building and says, hey, come on, we want you to come to a wrestling match. You know, we want to tie up with those organizations that need help. And then, you know, we go back year after year after year. I mean, the Missouri Athletic Club. I mean, this will be our 5th year that we've been there. I mean,
it was so cool seeing you guys doing that down there. That was just like, man, visually, it was very cool, man. I was very stoked to see you guys doing that.
Yeah, last year we had Jake Roberts, Jake the Snake, Hacksaw Duggan, Jimmy Hart, and the year before Sergeant Slaughter, and all kinds of guys coming in. They always want to bring one in, and but it's we're staying busy. I got the greatest, you know, I got guys in my locker room that was trained by Harley Race.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Attila.
Superstar Steve
Attila
Fender,
Khan, baby.
Attila Khan.
Attila
yeah.
Khan. You know what?
Yeah.
I just, not to put I ran into Superstar the other day. I ran into him at my work. I don't tell you where I work. It doesn't matter. But I look up. I'm like, Superstar? He turns around. And he's like, it's me. It was cool. And we had a little brief conversation. I don't know if he told you that. He probably didn't. But yeah, shout out to Superstar Steve Fender. But yeah.
Great guy. He was on the card Saturday night. And then we did TV tapings yesterday. And so they were there, which is, you know, we have our YouTube channel on every Sunday night at 8 o'clock on YouTube. Yes. And then it's on Intrigue Television in St. Louis. And so a couple of different other platforms that has called us and said, hey, we want to put your programming on there. We like it. It's old school. There's nothing out there like it, you know.
And I will be putting links to that, SICW.org. On Facebook, you got SICW Wrestling Explosion. You got on YouTube, Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling. Yeah, you guys are very good at keeping your content coming. And again, the visual, when I see you guys' visual in-studio stuff, I just love it. Because, I mean, I don't know if that's – you're going for old school stuff, I get it. But the aesthetic, when I see it, reminds me of Georgia Championship Wrestling. Like, literally, it's that old school vibe. And you guys, like I said, you're Attila Khan. You guys just have a roster of cats who are not only – I mean, they're just great at the business. They're great at what they do. And it's really, when you watch it, you viscerally feel just like keeping that energy alive of that old school stuff, man. Unless you saw it back in the day, you don't know what to compare it to, but it's just cool to see it when you guys do it, man, because it's definitely, visually, it's an homage to that old school stuff.
Well, and like I said, when you've got the locker room in-depth years of experience, the Gary Jacksons, the Big Texan, who is my classic champion now, and Bobby D, Bruiser Brody, 2-time Bruiser Brody back-to-back winner on there, and then the Canadian hero Sean Benson, or, you know, Superstar Steve Fender is the Central States champion, along with we're affiliated with the AIFW organization, and, you know, there's like 32 countries that we're in with them, and
wow. Good for you.
So he's the United States champion for them, and so he's got 2 belts he holds his pants up with now.
Nice.
And, but it's fun. And then we have the tag team champions, which is a team called the Top Guns, and they're both graduates of the Bob Orton Ace Wrestling Academy that he runs for me, and One of them has already been down to OVW. In fact, he goes back again on June 6th. So that's kind of the stepping stone for bigger, better things for Brandon Beretta. Brandon Beretta is his name, and Joey Vanetti. They're the modern day rock and roll express, if you would. And they're out there hitting it, and I think they've got about 12 students in this class that Bob Orton and his trainers are taking care of and building the future legends right now. And that's what I tell everyone about. It's about the past, the present, and the future. And if you want to go to a wrestling school, Ace Wrestling Academy is it, or you go down to Dr. Tom Pritchard, who will also be joining us on the 18th. And then, or you go down to Dory Funk, the Funk Conservatory down in Oscal, Florida. Those are three of the most reputable ones. And that's when I have these young men or women call me and say, hey, can we come in and work for you? The first thing I say, who trained you? Now, if you tell me one of those, then you got your foot in the door.
Right.
Then the next, I want to see some photos and I want to see some videos. And but if you tell me, hey, my neighbor or my brother and I used to go out with our friends and we wrestle around in the yard, or we jumped off of this, which I don't have anything against that because that's what Mick Foley used to do.
I was going to say,
but there ain't too many Mick Foleys left.
Yeah, it's few and far between. That's the exception. That's not the rule.
And again, I never count anybody out because you can't judge a book by its cover. And we give opportunities to people, and that's the one thing about the ACE Academy is that if you come in and after a couple of lessons, they can tell right away if you're got what it takes to do it, and we don't want to take your money and then have you chasing a dream that we know that you're not going to catch, and we'll tell you what you need to work on, and then maybe you come back for another class, another session, and some of these schools that they have out there now, it's all about the money farm,
and that's unfortunate.
And I don't want that. I don't want that reputation.
No,
I want it to be. I want it to be able to say that we turned out because there's only a real small percentage of people who go to these schools that's going to make it to any of the bigger stages.
Without a doubt,
it's just foreign people, and we tell them that.
Yeah,
don't quit your day job.
Exactly.
You got to be able to provide for your families and yourself, and chase the dream, because after all, that's what I did. I chased my dream. I tell them I was just smarter. I didn't want to get in there and get all bruised up. I wanted to learn how to deliver a quality product with quality people.
Yes.
And that's what I do. And these guys go out there and take these bumps and all that. My hat is off to each and every one of them, because, whew, man.
Yeah. So much has been lost.
I know all about gravity. When you go up, you got to come down. And,
well,
it's not the fall, it's that sudden stop.
I know I've kept you a minute, and I could sit here and talk to you for hours. I'm not going to keep you too much longer. But since you've talked about that, and we've talked about this in our previous conversation, it's kind of obvious, but I would love to hear your articulation of it. The business, like you said, the toothpaste has gone out of the tube, and you can't put it back. Kayfabe is technically kind of, it's not a thing anymore. But how do you see the business now? Like in WrestleMania, I stopped watching kind of sports entertainment. For me, it was like, unless I'm seeing somebody who like a son or daughter of somebody used to watch before, Charlotte's still around, Cody's still around, Dustin's still around. I think it was really cool what they just did with Cody, but I just haven't paid attention to the product anymore because it is so different, and I have no kind of tie to my kind of old school stuff, and I still appreciate the business. I still appreciate what the boys and girls get out there and do, but your thoughts on the business now, completely night and day from what it was. Just what are your thoughts on it? Is it watchable anymore? What's going on with it?
Well,
clearly it's watchable. Obviously,
my own personal opinion. I don't watch it. I tried here about a month and a half ago, right after Randy Orton came back. Bob told me that they were doing something with him, and so I was going to try to watch it. But I got to about 40 minutes of it, and out of the first 40 minutes of the program,
this Raw,
20 minutes, 21 minutes, but maybe even 25 minutes, I think it was.
Promo.
Between commercials and promos.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what am I sitting here watching this for? And what they're doing is not making any sense to me. And one of the reasons is because I don't keep up with it. I don't watch it. Now, there are fans out there, as we know, that walk and breathe the modern day wrestling, and that is fine. That's a younger generation.
Sure.
That's because they don't know about the old school. But I don't. I can't keep up with it. I don't watch AEW. I don't watch Ring of Honor. I don't watch NWA. I would sooner go to my library and pick out a Johnny Valentine against a Edouard Carpentier or a Dick Bruiser against Ric Flair, and sit there, and I can watch that all day long if I had the time. I just cannot bring it. My son-in-law watches it today, and he keeps me informed of what's going on. I walked in the other night, and he had come up. My daughter's been staying with me to help take care of my wife, and so he comes up, and helps me with when our local shows are. So I walked in Friday night, and he had whatever. Well, I don't even know what show it's on. This is SmackDown or whatever. But he said, "Well, Dad, you can turn it if you want to." And I said, "Oh, give me the controller."
You're gonna tell me twice.
I just can't get into it because there's no storylines as far as I know from what I've been told. I have people that tell me, Herb, when we watch SICW and we watch it every Sunday night and then we come to the house show, we know what we're there for. We know the payoff's coming. They tell me when you watch the Monday Night Raws and the Tuesday night this and the Wednesday night this, however many nights a week it's on, you can't. Even if you watch it each and every episode, there's no rhyme or reason. But again, you can't knock it. I mean, look at what they do. But it's not wrestling these days. It's marketing. And that's all it is.
And it's almost like we're comparing two similar things. There's people, guys and girls, that go and get in the ring and an entrance and stuff, but you're almost comparing two different sports or genres, if you will. It really is like two opposite things. I mean, obviously things change, but like you said back in the day, Johnny Valentine's of the world, less was more. You didn't have to have pyro, etc.
No.
And, I mean, no. And I don't know.
Johnny Valentine was a guy at Kiel Auditorium, and I don't know how many shows you went there, wrestling shows, but they had the black draping coming off of the stage. He could walk from that dressing room, the backstage area, down that long aisle with that long red bathrobe on, climb up them steps with that blonde hair, and just get in the middle of the room, put his hands on his hips, and the crowd was standing on their feet from the time he came out from behind the curtain.
That's awesome.
He'd get up in that ring and do a 360, a slow 360, and get a standing ovation. No music, no nothing.
Yeah.
No, and it was just, I've said all along, there are people who love Hulk Hogan, and I tell them, what made Hulk Hogan so good was the Eye of the Tiger music and Thunder Lips.
And Rocky 3, without a shadow of a doubt.
And Rocky 3, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I could have, if you'd have played Thunder Lips, you'd have been the Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Because there's guys out there tell you that wrestles him that he wasn't that good, but I like Hulk, I like Terry, but again, right place, right time.
Yeah.
But the same way back in the day, we talked about the territories a while ago. You didn't work 10 miles down the road years ago. You didn't work 50 miles down the road years ago. If you did, that's where you paid the price. Because if I'm the promoter in this town and you're working for me in my territory, and this is the discussion goes on out there now, and I get cussed about and I get labeled, and even though it wasn't my idea, my locker room several years ago instituted what's called the 25-mile rule, meaning if you work for us, you can't work for another promotion 25 miles. You got to go past that 25 miles. The reason being is because if Jeffrey's my big star, my big baby, and then the next promotion 25 or 20 miles down the road or 10 miles down the road has Jeffrey on a card, and now you're all of a sudden the big heel. We're drawn from the same fan pool.
Yes.
Now we have caused mass confusion. Well, wait a minute. I just saw Jeffrey down at SICW, and I paid this amount of money to see him, but now down here, he's the big heel, and I'm seeing different things. So my locker rooms, and they wanted a 50-mile rule, and I said, nah, this is the modern times. Let's.
Yeah.
The problem is the workers nowadays, all they've heard is about road trips. And they think to get in a car and drive 10, 15, 20 miles is a road trip. I tell them, no, you get in a car and you drive to Chicago. You get in a car, you drive to Kansas City. You get in a car, you drive to Iowa. Those
you
are road
work
trips.
for, what was it, Bill Watts in the Mid-South.
Bill Watts in the Mid-South.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and that's when Manny and I talked the other night. I did an interview with him, and we talked about that, and he laughed. He said, man, he said, if we'd leave a show, we'd get in a car, and we'd drive 300 miles to the next show.
That's crazy.
He said, we better not be caught working anywhere in between. If we did, we knew we better just keep on going. And that's unfortunately, and again, back then the guys were doing it for a living.
Yeah.
That was what was paying their bills.
True.
That's what was feeding their families. Nowadays, that's why we tell the guys nowadays, don't quit your day job. You're out here working for peanuts. Some of them, the old saying, a hot dog and a handshake, that happens at some of these other organizations.
Right.
And they brag about it. That's the one thing that I have failed to learn in 51 years that I have not conquered is how to get people to work for free.
Good luck with that, especially professional wrestling.
Well, yeah, but see, there are people that do that. There are and I know you've heard the term a hot dog and a handshake.
Oh, for sure.
I went and worked for, well, that's promoters that get these guys to come in and say, okay, I'm going to train you. I'm not going to pay you because you've got to pay your dues. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to beat you up 2-3 nights a week and teach you how to be a semi-wrestler. But then we're going to have a match, and I'm going to throw you out there, and you're going to help set the ring up, and you're going to help tear the ring up, tear it down. And guess what? That's part of your dues. You don't get paid. Well, I haven't learned how to do that yet. If you work for me, you get paid.
Yeah.
If you're the ring announcer, you get paid. If you play the music, which I don't really like the music, but I have to try to keep up with the modern times. Larry hated it.
Did he?
Larry,
oh, really?
Oh my God, he hated it. And he'd always say, Sam would turn over in his grave. If a guy can't come out and get his applause or his boos from just his own personality,
there wasn't a level of appreciation. And I'm not knocking Larry's hustle at all. But I mean, as times change, I think it was the Freebirds, or even honestly, I remember hearing it was Sergeant Slaughter saying to Vince McMahon Sr., "Let me play my Marine Corps thing." He's like, "Holy shit, this is something here." So within
it did, and Larry never did catch on to it.
Okay.
Never did like it. And even in fact, on doing TV, because we don't play the music and that on TV anyway, because you got time restraints on us. But Larry would gripe about, whoa, they goddamn music. Why let them go out there and get their own?
Well, and I
music.
get that, because going back to what you just said about Johnny Valentine, he saw freaking this dude walk out, no pyro, and get all the heat or love in the world.
Well, and the other thing that really rubbed Larry was when some of the guys would get in there and beg the audience to cheer for him. You get in there and you're working a guy, come on. Well, if you got to tell the audience to do that, guess what that means?
Yeah.
It means you ain't doing it the right way.
So true,
and Larry,
man.
And I remember Larry used to tell some of the Green Arms, hey, don't get out there. If you got to beg them, you're not doing your job. And then
we talk
when you
about,
stop and look at it, it makes sense.
It totally does. It totally, and like you were saying earlier, it's like this. We know it's kind of a work to some degree, but it's you go into the movie with that suspension of disbelief. So it's really up to the wrestlers to like you said, it totally makes sense. You have to be responsible for getting your own heat, etc. And you shouldn't. It's I don't know. It's so fascinating because the psychological aspect's hugely missing, and like your Jake the Snakes Roberts of the world, who were so great at just pulling you in, but not the best wrestler in the world, not Jack Body, but he would psychologically he'd suck you in.
Oh yeah, well, and like I said, you just hit the word right there. Psychology of the business is not there a lot of times anymore. This younger generation watches so much of this stuff on TV. I mean, one of the things that the trainers at Ace Academy tells them, every week you got homework to do, and this week we want you to go find this tape on YouTube, and we want you to watch it and report back to us what you thought about it.
There you go.
And it's not the stuff that they can watch on Monday night. You better not come back in here and say, oh, I watched Monday night and I saw this. You better go find something from those 70s and the 80s and see it. I mean, I walked into one night, we were doing a show at the Belle Claire Fairgrounds the next night, so they had the training set up there, and they had a Killer Kowalski match on, and the students were sitting there saying, oh, my God, look at this punch-kick guy. Well, yeah, that's what we called him back in the day, a punch-kick heel, because that's what Kowalski did. That's what made him so great. And
tore off, who was it, Eric the Red's ear?
Yeah, kicked him. Yeah.
Doesn't sound fake to me. Doesn't sound too fake.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And not Eric, was it Eric the Red or Yukon or something like that?
No, Yukon Eric.
I'm sorry. Eric the Red's a different
Eric.
person.
Right. But they, those students were like, holy crap, this is, and stuff happens. We all know that. I mean, there's injuries that take place, but if you stop and look at what happens nowadays, these young guys getting out there getting hurt, one is they're not trained properly. We didn't have those injuries back in the day like that because the guys knew what they were doing. They knew how to take care of one another. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't animosity because, it was no secret. If you were higher up on the card, you made more money. So everybody was trying to gain that top spot, and one of the biggest problems that we have nowadays, and I tell everybody, I love it when they say, well, wrestling has changed. I say, no, guys, you got that wrong. Wrestling hasn't changed. A headlock back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and all the way up to the present is a headlock. It's the same way. An arm drag is the same way. Anything like that in wrestling has not changed. What has changed in our business is the three-letter word called ego. And that's the problem. Guys don't check their ego at the door. They all got to be on top. They all got to be the champion. Why is this guy the champion? Well, I hate to tell them, Sam's favorite thing back in the day was, who's putting the butts in the seats?
Yeah.
If we don't have butts in the seats, we don't have a show.
And even watching a lot of those shoots or some of those videos, I mean, it's not uncommon in the business, but like you said, sometimes when people get to a certain echelon or certain level in their career, I'm not putting him over. I'm not putting him over. I'm not putting her over. You know what I mean? It becomes that kind of...
Well, but see, Jeff, that's what was so good about territorial days, because we could take that guy in St. Louis, and after we had him here for 6 months or even a year, and all of a sudden his popularity, whether it's the heel or the baby, starts diminishing, Sam would pick up the phone and he would call a Fritz, or he'd call a Paul Bosch, or he'd call a Stu Hart and say, hey, I got so-and-so here. I've had him for 6 months. He's pretty well burned out. How about taking him up there? That's where that guy would go.
Right.
And he'd be there for 6 months.
Fresh
or
audience.
He may get there. Yeah, he may only be there for 3 months. And they find out, well, he's not getting over here. And then they pass him around.
Right.
That's what made the territorial days so great.
Absolutely.
Nowadays, there is no such thing. And, that's because of good old Vincey boy.
Yeah. I think your boy Sean Vincent posted something the other day about, what happened, basically. Why did things go the way they did? I think I never comment on stuff like that, but I like Sean, I love you, and all that stuff. So I just there's a certain inevitability to it. Cable TV, Vince, the internet. I mean, over the years, I think it kind of would have inevitably happened because those fiefdoms, those territories, the digital world start breaking down those borders where it wasn't just a few channels, like Memphis back in the day. I mean, it was great to have that happen. That's why I consider it the golden age, but it just couldn't necessarily, I don't think, take place anymore.
Well, what happened is the promoters that were left got greedy, and Vince come in and offered big money. And if Sam would have been 20 years younger when that was all taking place, and if he'd have held it all together, because a lot of those promoters had money, but again, they were getting older. They were afraid that what Vince was capable of doing. But what he did is he conquered, divided them and conquered is what he did.
And at the end of the day, it's kind of like we've talked about throughout the show, the road stories, the hardship of being a professional wrestler. What Vince was trying to lend itself, or trying to carrot, if you will, to back in the day, that the purging he did in the AWA, Hulk, Gene, Jesse, and it was about the money. Like, I'm sorry, Vern, I can't give you these 2 weeks because Vince is paying me not to come show up. I mean, it's completely and it just could be a money thing, really. And it seemed to me it's certain inevitability because it's, like you said earlier, everyone's trying to pay the bills. As much as I love you, Herb, as much as I love you, Vince, as much as I love you, Jim Crockett or Vern or whatever, I gotta pay the bills. I'm tired of driving all these for a hot dog and a handshake or whatever you said. So it's like it became a financial thing.
Yeah. Well, and what if a lot of those promotions back then would have done what Larry did when Vince sent the boys in to try to buy the library? They should have held their own. They should have said, sorry, no. And you can dangle that carrot out there all you want. And he knew once he got one or two people to bite on that, then they started falling off of the support group, one right after another. But if they'd have done what Larry and I did, we still got the library, even though it's been bootlegged out there, and people goes and buys. They bought the tapes and they put them on the internet, but the master file and everything, we still got them. But if we could have easily said, we're going to sell you that library, and then he'd have had it all. But guess what? You don't have that St. Louis library.
No, and that's what makes you, again, the last of the Mohicans, because whether it's individual wrestlers like we just described or people with their libraries, you have not to say sold out like it's bad, but have cashed in on it. And you guys, with St. Louis being what they were, the capital, the headquarters, the NWA, you still have the masters. You still have all of the tapes from that old school wrestling at the Chase, and that's something that can't be underestimated.
Well, and that's, it's like the Bruiser stuff, and there's people out there that says, well, Dick gave me copies of this or that, and I say, well, he may have. I can't dispute that, but I'll show you the vault that we've got them in, and they're still in the big metal cases, each hour show on the TV reels. Like I said, and you just don't take them down to your local film place, because it takes a special machine to do that. And I lucked out, knock on wood, is I found a place in St. Louis that does it for me, but it's expensive, and
it's not cheap.
And no, it's not, and then they're old, so some of them's got some mold on them that they have to take and run through a special process to clear that up. But, the ones that I've got done so far, I mean, the quality is great. But again, I hope I'm able to stay around and use them to get people some enjoyment out of them, because, the Bruiser was more of we always referred to him as the minor league, kind of like the Kansas City operation was.
What was that? AAW? What was that? Not
All-Star Wrestling.
Okay.
Is what they had their program as. That was Geigel and Race and.
Talking about the Bruiser, Browns. The Bruiser.
The Bruiser up in that was the what was it? W8 World Class. Yeah, I can't think of it.
That's all right. It's all
AWA.
good. No,
it wasn't. No, AWA was
Poffo.
Vern. ICW was Lanny and Angelo.
ICW, okay.
Because they used to run in Illinois. In fact, they didn't stay long. They were running in Centralia, Illinois, Fairfield, Illinois, and then that's where I started running. And then they like I said, I had guys that were on TV, and other than Randy and Lanny and people like that, they didn't really have that big of a support group. And then I had Cousin Junior, and I had Hillbilly Jim before he was Hillbilly Jim. He used to work for me. He used to work for me as Harley Davidson, and in fact, awesome. I was the last show at the Belle Claire Fairgrounds. His last show before he became Hillbilly Jim, he was with us as Harley Davidson. But him and Lanny King, who later became Cousin Junior, those guys all worked for Larry and I before they even went to Vince.
I remember when that whole thing popped with Jim and what was his name? Uncle Elmer, and I was like, "That's Plowboy
Uncle
Slim.
Elmer.
That's Plowboy Slim or Plowboy from
Yeah.
Plowboy Frazier from
Frazier.
Yeah. All right.
Oh yeah, just great times, great history, and like you said, we could sit here and talk forever and ever. But
I do have a couple more questions.
Sure.
When you start bringing up the films, I remember listening to Jim Cornette, and when WCW folded, he somehow rolled up on this dumpster that they were throwing out films that he wound up monetizing to like crazy, like old Mid-Atlantic stuff, Wahoo, Johnny Valentine, stuff they were throwing out that was just like, wow. He just rolled up on a huge gem. So obviously, it's still, we all know if you own these archives, you could easily put them on some kind of streaming platform and make a nice little mint out of it. So good kudos to Jim Cornette, and kudos to you, Herb, and you and Larry.
Jim Cornette is, and he gets a bad rap, but Jimmy is my guy. He keeps inviting me to come down to Castle Cornet, and I've been trying to get him to make this 18th, and it's still not out of the question. His wife.
I saw that, Herb. Because when I dude, listen, it's been whenever he was there that last time. I was a grown-ass man, bro, and I'm telling you, I sat there and marked out for Jim Cornette. I was that annoying fan. He's got a line of people he's trying to talk to, and I'm like, yeah, Jim Cornette. I literally, that was me. I swear to God, I got a picture with him, and I know it'll never happen because I've hit him up a couple times, like, please come on my podcast. But, dude, his mind for the business, and he was in that era that I just loved so much. In hearing his beginning, he was a photographer down in Memphis, and just my love for Memphis and all that other good stuff.
I sent him a copy of the that recent Wrestling at the Chase book that Ed Wheatley and I done, and because it's a coffee table book full of just page after page. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it's got the picture of Bruiser Brody and Dick the Bruiser on the front cover. But it's a big, and I mean, it's Ed didn't waste anything on. I mean, the pages are just heavy duty pages. The cover and everything. It's just a beautiful book. And I sent a copy to Cornette, and on his podcast, I tuned in one day, and he's on there talking, and I swear he was probably hugging it because he's talking about how, man, I go to bed with it at nighttime, and it smells so fresh, and the pages are so crisp, and it's really well put together, and but what a guy he is, and him and I talk business because back in the day, him and Larry exchanged some programs because I've got all the programs that they used to send out. And I've got the full copy and hardbound books, like brand new. And Cornette's got a copy of them.
He's got everything, man. He's got everything.
He's the only other person that I know that's got the full set that I've got. And so him and Larry used to exchange. There was a few dates that he didn't have that Larry had, and so they swapped some things back and forth. But he's got his, and he's proud of that. It's kind of like Bill Apter's been. We inducted Bill Apter into the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame, and that all came about. I was sitting at home one night about 2:00 in the morning, and I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about, why isn't Bill Apter in any of these Hall of Fames and all of this and that? And the next morning, I called Larry and says, hey, we're putting Bill Apter into the St. Louis Hall of Fame. And Bill, to this day, still brags about going in that because he used to come here and take photographs all the time.
I do. I mean, that's another thing I remember. The Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Bill Apter, Stu Stacks, and I mean, that was the stuff back in the day. Bill, I mean, if you can come out Friday night, May 17th at the Aviator Hotel, come check it out. Herb, I've kept you too long, but I have to ask you this. I've been wondering this since I met you, dude. Your, I guess, Mount Rushmore, for lack of a better term, your favorite angles. Think about it for a second. I'm not going anywhere. I'll edit it together if you can take some minute to think about it. But some of your top 5 angles throughout your history of watching professional wrestling.
Well, I'll tell you the first one right off the top of my mind because I refer to it quite a bit. We've even reshot the angle at SICW. It was between Nature Boy Buddy Rogers and Cowboy Bob Ellis. And they had done the angle that nobody could reverse the figure 4 grapevine that Nature Boy Buddy Rogers was so known for. He was actually the second Nature Boy, the blonde. Of course, everybody knows Gorgeous George was the original one to come out and throw his gold bobby pins out to the ladies. Yes. But Buddy Rogers, and they did this angle at Wrestling at the Chase, and week after week, nobody could reverse it. He was beating everybody they threw to him, and then of course along comes Pretty Boy Cowboy Bob Ellis, and he's probably still a favorite to this day of a lot of the ladies. And so they worked this angle, and nobody's going to break it. Bob Ellis can't break it. So they're outside on the floor in front of the announcer at that time, and that's where they were going to do this demonstration. And of course, Buddy Rogers, Cowboy Bob Ellis gets on the floor, and he's going to put the figure 4 on him, and he's walking around him, and Ellis is telling, come on, and he's holding his leg up, come on, put it on me, I'm going to show you I can do this. Wow. And after that, Rogers just starts putting the boots to him, kicking him, and Ellis juices, and that's setting up a big match for Kiel Auditorium.
Nice.
And that stuck in my mind forever. And then before Larry passed away, we did that same angle. And people, in fact, Hacksaw Jim Duggan was at the show where we did the blow off of that angle. And it was about a 6 months build up that we took. And Hacksaw Jim Duggan, I was taking him back to the hotel that night, and he said, Herb, you aren't doing anything but repeating history. Because I've got all of the cards from anybody who ever wrestled in St. Louis. They're on 3x5 index cards. If you want to know how many times Dick the Bruiser wrestled, who he wrestled, who won, what the attendance was at Kiel Auditorium or at the arena, or on TV, I've got everybody who ever wrestled in St. Louis.
That's like Coronet, man. His book, like literally every night, and which is kind of savant stuff. But I think that's really cool when you start talking about archiving it.
Yeah, so that's the top angle that has always stuck with me, and it worked because I had people coming up to me saying, "Oh my gosh, we didn't see this coming, man. Whoever came up with this idea?" And of course, I said, trust me, it wasn't me. It happened way back in the day. It's just that I remembered it. The other one I liked was the angle that they were building up with the Iron Claw with the Von Erichs. And Harley Race. They was trying to show how strong that was. And I'm sure you remember that match. Fritz and Kevin was outside on the floor, and it was David against Harley. Mm-hmm. And Harley gets ready to come off the rope, and David catches him in the Iron Claw. And, of course, people get confused. The Von Erich's claw was called the Iron Claw, and Von Roschke's claw was called the Brain Claw.
Did not know that.
Yes, and so they're trying to set up this match for David, and he catches him, and of course that's the match that made because Sam didn't allow a lot of red on TV, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
He wasn't a fan of all of that stuff, but Fritz is the one who convinced him because they shot a similar angle like that in Fritz's organization. And so they brought it up here to St. Louis, which was known to do. You could run this angle here, and then you could run it in Carolinas. You could run it for Crockett.
Well, and oftentimes with Fritz's Iron Claw, because it was so powerful, you would see, there would be some,
right.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. And of course, if you and I ever get together, I'll tell you a little bit more about that, how that all took place. Because if you're really watching that tape, that program, you see what all takes place with Harley. And of course, Harley ends up passing out, and they declare David the winner of the TV match. And of course, then Fritz gets in the ring, and Kevin gets in the ring, and Larry gets up there. So that was another good angle I liked. And but it's just memories like that stick with you. And plus I've got those tapes, so I get to go back and refresh my memory.
All right.
memory on some of that stuff.
I won't trouble you for a top five. Give me top three. You got me the Buddy Rogers, Bob Ellis, Harley Race, David Von Erich. What's the top three? What's that third one that comes in for her?
I would think the third one would be when we didn't get to finish it off, and I still to this day would have loved to see it because I saw it in the Fritz's organization, the Freebirds, against the Von Erichs, and Larry was in the process. If you remember back, I'm sure you can. We'd already had Bam Bam Gordy up here coming in, and Michael Hayes and Buddy Roberts was making their way up here, and Larry had made a deal with Fritz to get the boys up here. So we were real close to getting the Von Erich and Freebirds feud brought to St. Louis.
What year would this be? What year?
Let's see, 80. What was Larry's? And what would you think that would be? It was 85, 86-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, because Sam.
David passed 85, correct? 80.
So it would have been before that. It had been 80. It would have been right after Vince took over and Larry started his promotion for that year. About 16 months. Larry ran his.
Okay.
And
wow.
And because he had Brody, he had Nikolai Volkov, we had Professor Torres Tanaka with us.
Wow. Jeez, man.
Randy Savage was there for a while with us. Tom Pritchard was with us. Cowboy Scott Casey. So Larry had built that. Yeah, Larry had built that. We had Luthez that was coming in as our special guest referee occasionally. And remember, he was setting up running because he couldn't get the TV rights at Channel 11, so he was on Channel 30 and with DuPont. And
that was here in St. Louis?
That was in St. Louis, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because we were doing the TV filming at the arena. And they cut the arena in half, and we used that for the studio.
Is that the Keel or Checkerdome?
Checkerdome.
Okay.
Checkerdome, the arena, yeah. Yeah, it used to be called the arena, and then I went to the Checkerdome, and then but Vince came in, and that's what prompted all that. Vince came in and bought the TV out from underneath.
Yes.
And then the TV people said, "Why don't you guys work together?" And
good luck.
And basically, Larry and said no, and of course, then financially, without that main TV, it became an obstacle. And then, of course, Larry, a lot of people didn't know this, Larry went to work for Vince for 10 years.
I was going to ask you that earlier. I remember that in our other conversation. I swore, even in addition to, I was like, have you guys been approached about getting purchased the volumes that you guys have? But I remember you saying, yeah, Larry went to work for him for a hot minute.
He worked for him for 10 years, and actually it was due to me that he got let go. He was in the planning stages of leaving anyway. But
and what year? I'm sorry to ask years. I'm a year date guy.
And I'm bad about.
I'm sorry.
That's my problem. But he.
That's okay.
He worked for 10 years for Vince, but in the meantime, I'm still running all the independent shows, and Larry's working with me behind the scenes, and so Larry calls me up one day and says, "Hey." Says Howard Finkel called and he wants me to run some spot shows here in the Midwest. He said at some schools, and Larry knew my wife was on the school board at Dupo High School, Dupo 196 here in Illinois. And he said, "What do you think about having a show there? And then maybe we do one in Collinsville." He said, "I got a connection there." And I said, "Well, hey, I'm game if you are." I said, "Is he going to have any problems?" He said, "No." He said, "We're going to do it on the QT." And so
QT being not letting him know that he knows
not
you.
letting him know that because I'm the independent guy.
Right. Okay.
But Larry was smart enough and knew that I would help him. And so I secured these high schools for him to run in. And I'll never forget the last one we did was at that Dupo High School. And Larry had taught me that he said, you got to be careful with them because what they'll do about 6 to 8 weeks out from the show that they announced, because, back then they would say, WWF is coming to Centralia, Illinois, or they're coming to Cape Girardeau, Missouri on such and such a day. Get your tickets early, blah, blah, blah. And about 6 to 8 weeks out, they would start calling you and saying, what is the advanced ticket sales? How much have you sold? And he said they measure that to where when they get to be a couple of weeks out, if they haven't sold X amount of tickets, they pull the plug on it. So here I'm the mayor of my hometown, which is right across the railroad tracks from Dupo, Illinois, where the show is going to be at. and we're going to do it on a Sunday afternoon. And this was back when the Smoking Guns, I don't know if you remember them. The main event was Bret Hart against Adam Bomb. The Wild Samoans were on that card.
Smoking Guns, was that one of the Armstrongs?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
But our road agents at that time was Rene Goulet.
Rene Goulet.
And Tony Gurria.
Yes.
Tony Gurria and I talk about all that all the time, because that was the show that Larry would tell me each week, because they would call me on a Monday morning, and the girl would say, how much ticket sales did you do last week? And so Larry had this chart figured out, because he knew what the breakoff point was. And so each week I would add, several more $100 to it. Well, we were about 10 days out from the show, and she had called me and said, what ticket sales have you got for current? And I told him it was like, 20-some thousand dollars. And said, okay, very good, thank you. And of course, it was on a Sunday afternoon. In fact, I put more people in that same gymnasium. And I do remember this date. This was the year before Frank got killed in 1987, when my main event was Bruiser Brody against Abdullah the Butcher. I put 2,200 fans in that gymnasium. Jeez. In the bleachers only, no floor seats.
Wow.
And but I actually put more fans in there for that main event than the WWF did when they came there. And so they only ended up doing like a $10,000 house for that show. And it was the following week when Larry got his pink slip saying that his services were no longer needed. And so we always joked about, because I lied to him about the advanced ticket sales, is why he probably got fired. And so, but it was a good thing. He was leaving. He was unhappy.
10 years, long time, especially, the way they ran business, the way Larry, oil and water, kind of like Jim Cornette. He was like, I just can't do this. Or even Jerry Jarrett is like, I can't do it. It's just
well, and what they did with Larry, because they knew they come to the realization it was better to have Larry inside being disgruntled than outside being disgruntled. And Larry, not only did he tell me, I heard him tell many people, those were the most miserable years of his life for 10 years.
Wow.
Not that he had to do a lot of work. It was just that he saw what was happening to the business.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Keep your enemies closer. And that's what they did with him. And But
wow.
Yeah, it was terrible. He and that's why I've got the entire transcript of his other book that he was writing, the last book that he was working on before he passed away, and everything but the last chapter was done. And then I would proofread the chapters, and his wife, who was a school teacher, English teacher, would do all the editing and all of that. So when he would get a couple of chapters done, he would email them to me, and I would read them and give him some pointers on, because this last book that he was working on was the difference between Sam Muchnick and Vince McMahon. And when he pitched the idea to me and his publisher, Michael Holmes from ECW Press, we both told him, said, Larry, this is going to be the hardest book you wrote. You did the Brody book, you did the Wrestling at the Chase book, you did the top 50 wrestlers of all times. This will be the hardest book you've done, because you were so close to Sam. You started working for him when you were 16 years old.
Wow.
And never really had any other job ever. He may have had one or two jobs, but if they wouldn't let him off on a Friday night to go to Kiel Auditorium, he'd end up quitting. He said, I got to go to wrestling.
Seriously.
And
so, awesome.
Yeah. So the only real job he had was for Sam, starting when, he didn't even have a driver's license when he started hanging around the office there at Sam. And his dad, Edwin, would have to drive him over, and that's how I would tag along with him. And so we told him and said, then you went to work for Vince, and they were the most miserable times of your life. So you've got to be fair, because regardless of what people think about Vince McMahon and what you think about him, he's done pretty well for himself.
Yes.
And he made boys a lot more money in the wrestling business. Bob Orton will tell you that it's working for Vince was great. Look what it's done for his family. It's made Randy a superstar.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of guys, Tony Atlas, people like that, even though they didn't like the concept of what was taking place, they couldn't turn down the money.
Well, and so, speaking about Kevin Von Erich again, he said something, I think, in the Heroes of World Class documentary about, the cyclical nature of all things, but specifically, entertainment, the professional wrestling business. It changes, and it did change, and it has changed. But like you said, Vince has, the WWE and sports entertainment, quote unquote, has changed a lot of people's lives. So there is some measure of silver lining to it. And, things like, his library, if you will, and even your library, we always will have to cherish that old school and what we appreciated back in the day. Again, all things change, and that's okay. But as long as we have these kind of archives and these things to kind of look back on and be like, man, this is, very nostalgic, how it was, how we liked it to be, and whatever it is now is, like we said earlier, very separate from what we grew up on, but it is what it is, as they say.
Yeah, we can't change the history.
Yeah.
But we can try to preserve it.
Without a doubt. Very well said.
Yeah, and that's what we do. Now, these people that say, "Oh, I'm not going to give up nothing. There's no price that could buy this or that." I'll be honest with you. If back in the day, if Vince McMahon would have said, "Hey, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars for that," and if it would have been the right price,
right,
without a doubt, Larry would have jumped on it.
Sure,
I know he would have, and I couldn't have blamed him.
Well, it's interesting. I wonder if he would have jumped on it had he not known what Kevin had said. Like Kevin said, "Hey, here's what they gave me for this," and then when they hit up Larry, he had something.
No, he wouldn't have done that.
Yeah,
because
probably
knowing what Kevin had told him, Larry wouldn't have done.
Well, I'm just saying if he hadn't been told that by Kevin.
Yeah, and I don't think he would have, because Larry. That's one thing about Larry Matisek. He was very smart about the money.
Yeah.
Because he went to the Sam Muchnick School of Money, and so that's why I'm saying if Sam and Larry, those two were still here now, they'd be chewing me up one side and down the other for taking the chances that I'm taking, because this FanFest is a chance.
Yeah.
What if it falls on its face? And you don't get enough to cover
even if you were to say it like you just said, you're attempting, and you're one of the last people to do it in this way, to preserve a legacy of this old school thing we knew of as professional wrestling. Nobody else could do it like this, Herb. I mean, you might be right, because you know those people way better than I do. But I mean, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, type thing. And in this stage of the game, I would wonder if they would like you said, kayfabe's dead, but we have this potential to keep this old thing alive. I don't know. Maybe nothing ventured, nothing gained, and that's why I've always respected about you,
that's
sir.
That's why I do it. I do it because I still believe that there are fans out there like myself, because that's what I've been, and that's what I'll continue to be. That's one of the first questions I get asked when I get on a podcast. How did you get into this business? I got into it as a fan. And my mom and I used to watch it together. That was kind of the bond between us. Yeah. She hated the bad guys, and of course I kind of rooted for him. And so, but that gave us something to argue over. But
oh man.
But we're all fans. You're a fan, and most of these guys that are doing these podcasts nowadays are fans. They'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I remember Jerry Briscoe telling him up at, because I used to go up to the Waterloo, Iowa, because he did the seminars up there, and he'd ask me to sit in on the seminars, and then we'd take the boys into another room, and we would kind of debrief on what they did wrong, and he would tell them, "Hey, I mark out about 17 hours a week watching wrestling." He says, I'm a fan, I'm hooked, and I don't mind. I don't like the word mark, because I believe fans that come and spend their hard-earned money on a show, for me, I'm going to treat them with respect, because they deserve that. And I want them to come, and I want them to cheer and boo and do what they want to, and they do. I got the great fans, but I just, when you talk about preserving the history and memories, unfortunately, unless you get Alzheimer's or dementia, man, you got to lock onto the memories. I tell our fans
Yes.
at all the shows, take all the pictures you want at these, like Saturday night. I told them, I encourage them, take these pictures. These little kids running around here, take them pictures and preserve them, because when they get older, I mean, the other night I had two kids come there, and they come up and they were talking about Randy Orton. And of course I said, well, he may be with us on the 18th, you know, and so they're excited about that. And one kid said, you know how to do the sleeper? And these kids are, 9-10 years old.
Aww.
So I was at ringside, so I turned them around and I put them in the sleeper
I
hold.
saw that picture. That picture. That's awesome. Is that what that's from? Okay.
And those kids they'll cherish that forever.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm telling you, 20 years from now, when they've got young kids running around, they'll say, hey, here you go, look, this is what we did, and but it's just great. And that's why, we do a show with the Shriners, another great organization that I just think that they do a tremendous job. I mean, they loved SICW so much that they went out and had a championship belt made, and each year it's defended. And
nice.
My champion that holds the classic SICW title also, he won their title, and now they've asked him to be in their parade on June, that they have a big annual Shriners parade over here, and they want him to be the Grand Marshal at. And so
wow.
It's organizations like that. I mean, this is the Shriners. This is an organization that helps our kids in need, and and pays their medical bills, and here I'm able to say I'm a little part of that, and my guys and gals in the locker room. It's big.
It is.
It's something that I hope people remember down the road when you're talking about history. They say, man, SICW, that those 4 letters that have been around for now 51 years meant something to somebody,
Sure, and that's what I was saying in the beginning. That's why you're not only awesome because of your involvement in what I love as professional wrestling, but your community involvement. You care. You're a decent and strong human being that's, like you said, has that kind of outreach that helps transform other people's lives through those kind of, Shriners, etc. Not a lot of people could say, Herb, in the world we live in, that they're transforming people's lives for the better, and you are one that are doing it. And this is, I mean, honestly, like you were talking earlier, this is why I really cherish any of our conversations, because, again, you are one of the last of the Mohicans of something that I've always cherished so much, and I know you love it like midnight loves the moon. That's why, this is probably one of the longest 2 hours, man. I got you. I expected you about 45 minutes, but that's okay. This is for posterity. This is for the archives. And this is why I wanted you to come on, because you are doing something that is like, obviously everyone's going to live very, very long, prolific lives, but we're bringing together people from a very old school time, and we are losing a lot of our legends. So it's so cool, man. You're talking 50 to 60 plus legends that are going to be at the Aviator Hotel Fanfest May 18th. Like I said, if you want to check him out, SICW.org on Facebook, SICW Wrestling Explosion on YouTube, Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling. Herb, I can't thank you enough, man. I really, really can't.
Oh, no, man. No, you're my friend, and like I said, I was glad when I first met you, because I knew you were an energetic individual that, and you are. I mean, you love what you're doing. You have the passion for, like you said, not just wrestling, but I've watched all some of the conspiracy shows that you've done, and that stuff kind of intrigues me also. Because I've been in law enforcement before, and I love the true crime stuff, and so when you do something, the one thing I know is you're going to go out there and get to the bottom of it one way or the other.
You damn straight.
And that's I used to say, damn straight, Skippy. and now you're doing it, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about what I love, and that's professional wrestling.
Well, and you're welcome back anytime, Herb. May 18th, like I said, Fanfest 2. It's going to be so epic. I will be there. Looking forward to seeing so many people, most notably my boy Manny Fernandez, the Bull. What's up, brother? I love you. And looking forward to meeting Tommy Rich for the first time among the list, 50 plus, that I'm just going to. And see, Herb, what I'm going to have to do is just rein myself in, because so many I'm going to be like, do you remember the thing? When the thing and the thing? Like, all right, we have 50 other people here, sir. Let's keep it moving.
Yeah. Like got to keep it moving.
Yes, like I did with Jim Cornette. It's all good.
Oh, yeah, we'll have fun. And like I said, if I score a Jim Cornette to be one of the last entrants, I'll definitely let you know.
That's cool, man. I'll talk his ear off again. Hopefully not be too annoying. Herb, again, I love you like midnight loves the moon, brother. I thank you so much for everything that you do. And, I'll always support you. You always are welcome back here on the show. Thank you so much. Sorry to keep you so long, but, man, you start talking about professional wrestling, your boy gets a little long-winded, and I'm glad. Thank you for your patience.
No problem. I appreciate any time, Jeffrey. And if I can ever help you, let me know.
Absolutely. Take care, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Peace and
Take
so
care.
much love. Thank you, Herb. We'll see you soon, guys.